This arrogant mafia boss thought stealing a classic muscle car from a quiet old grandfather was a brilliant idea.
But that frail old man was actually the legendary architect of SEAL Team 6, and he just declared absolute war.
The cool evening breeze whipped across the quiet suburban street as 70-year-old Arthur Pendleton carefully draped a thick microfiber cloth over the wide hood of his flawless 1969 Mustang Mach 1. The deep glossy black paint gleamed under the dim yellow streetlights, a true testament to thousands of hours of meticulous care and dedication. Arthur was a very quiet, unassuming man who kept his front lawn perfectly manicured and happily mended broken bicycles for all the local neighborhood kids. His weathered sun-tanned face bore deep wrinkles, and his heavy calloused hands moved with a slow, deliberate precision that spoke of a long, hard life. The absolute peace of the calm evening was suddenly shattered by the deafening roar of massive diesel engines as three heavily tinted matte black SUVs rolled aggressively into the quiet cul-de-sac surrounding Arthur's small driveway like a pack of hungry predatory wolves. The heavy armored doors swung open, and out stepped Vincent Cavallo, the ruthless and supremely arrogant young boss of the city's most powerful underground crime syndicate. Vincent wore a highly tailored Italian silk suit that probably cost more than Arthur's entire humble house, along with a smug, entitled grin that proved he had never once been told no in his entire pathetic, pampered life. He was flanked closely by four massive street thugs with bulging, tattooed muscles and heavy concealed weapons bulging obviously beneath their cheap leather jackets. Vincent took a slow, arrogant drag from a thick imported cigar and flicked a glowing hot ash directly onto Arthur's pristine, clean concrete driveway. "That is a truly beautiful piece of classic machinery," old man Vincent said, his deep, loud voice oozing with a fake politeness that barely hid his true venomous intent. "I have been looking for a vintage Mach 1 in exactly this perfect condition, and tomorrow is my 25th birthday. So I'm going to do you a huge favor today and take it off your weak, wrinkled hands for $5,000 in cold, hard cash." Arthur did not flinch, and he certainly did not back away a single inch. He simply wiped a tiny speck of dust from the polished chrome bumper and looked the young mob boss dead in the eye with a heavy gaze so cold it could instantly freeze boiling water. "The car is not for sale," Arthur stated firmly, his deep, raspy voice remaining calm and entirely unafraid of the obvious danger. Vincent chuckled a nasty grating sound as his loyal goons laughed and mocked the lone old man. "You do not seem to understand exactly who I am," Grandpa Vincent sneered, stepping dangerously close until he was close enough to smell the cheap cologne radiating off the arrogant boss. "I personally run this entire city, and every single piece of useless trash in it belongs entirely to me. So when I tell you I am taking your nice car, you drop to your knees and hand over those keys, or you get buried permanently in your own dirt backyard." Arthur slowly folded his cleaning cloth and carefully placed it on his metal workbench. "I highly suggest you and your dumb boys get back in your ugly trucks and drive away right now, while you still have unbroken legs to press the gas pedals, with Arthur Warren firmly, his posture shifting into something dangerously still. The entitled crime boss saw red at the blatant disrespect from an old civilian. With a vicious snarl, Vincent nodded to his largest enforcer. The gigantic thug lunged forward without warning, driving a heavy brass-knuckled fist directly and brutally into Arthur's lower ribs. The sickening, terrible crunch of bone echoed loudly through the quiet suburban street as Arthur was thrown violently backward to the rough asphalt. Before the bleeding old man could even process the sudden agony, the other three thugs swarmed over him, delivering a ruthless, merciless hail of heavy boot kicks to his stomach, his back, and his head. Arthur gritted his teeth, tasting warm metallic blood rapidly filling his mouth, but he absolutely refused to give them the sick satisfaction of a single cry or pathetic plea for mercy. He took the brutal, savage beating in total grim silence, a stoic fact that only infuriated Vincent even more. "Enough," Vincent barked loudly, pulling a heavy silver revolver from his coat pocket and aiming it directly at Arthur's bloody, beaten face. The Mafia boss bent down low and ripped the silver car keys directly from the torn belt loop of Arthur's jeans. "Consider this a free lesson in proper respect, you pathetic old relic," Vincent laughed, and spit directly onto Arthur's torn plaid shirt. Vincent climbed proudly into the leather driver's seat of the classic Mustang, revving the massive V8 engine with a deafening roar before tearing out a cul-de-sac, leaving thick black tire marks on the concrete. His thugs jumped back into their SUVs and quickly followed their boss's new prize, leaving Arthur broken and bleeding alone in the cold darkness. For 10 long silent minutes, Arthur lay there on the ground in terrifying white-hot agony, and his shattered ribs radiating through his entire body like fire. A normal civilian man would have frantically called an ambulance. A normal man would have called the local city police, not knowing they were already completely owned and on Vincent's payroll. But Arthur Pendleton was not a normal weak man. He was retired Command Master Chief Arthur Pendleton, the sole surviving architect of the United States Navy SEAL Team 6, and a terrifying living legend known in highly classified military circles simply as a Reaper. He had spent 40 years conducting the most ruthless, highly classified black operations in hostile enemy territory, and every single admiral commander and Tier 1 operator currently serving in the Special Forces had either been personally trained by him or revered his bloody name like a true military god. Arthur slowly dragged his broken, aching body off the wet concrete, his piercing, predatory eyes burning with a deadly, unforgiving hellfire. He limped slowly past his kitchen telephone, completely ignoring it, and stumbled down the creaky wooden stairs into his dusty, unfinished, pitch-black basement. He moved deliberately toward a solid steel heavy tactical footlocker hidden beneath a military tarp in the deep shadows. He punched in a classified 6-digit alphanumeric code, and a heavy lock popped open with a loud pressurized metallic hiss. Inside there were no cheap metals, no old dusty uniforms, and no trash civilian souvenirs. There was only a classified matte black military-grade satellite communicator that securely bypassed every single civilian network on the entire planet and connected directly to the secure desk of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Arthur wiped the thick blood from his chin and pressed the only red button on the secure device. It rang exactly once before a sharp, highly authoritative voice answered. "This is Admiral Vance. State your classified authorization code." The voice barked strictly. Echo 7 Romeo, Romeo 1 Arthur rasped, his voice cutting like shaved ice. Dead shock silence fell over the secure line for 3 long, terrifying seconds as a powerful admiral recognized a legendary call sign and the gravelly, unmistakable voice of his old mentor. "Master Chief," the admiral said, his tone instantly shifting to one of absolute deep reverence and urgent lethal concern. "It has been 12 years, sir. Is everything all right?" "I currently have a pest problem, Admiral," Arthur replied, coldly coughing up a small, thick globule of blood onto the cold concrete floor. "A stupid local thug named Vincent Cavallo just decided to steal my property and put me in the dirt, and I want to handle completely off the books, no mercy, and absolutely no survivors." The Admiral did not hesitate for a single fraction of a second, because an unprovoked attack on the Reaper was considered a direct lethal insult and an act of war against the entire United States Navy SEAL Command. "Consider it done, Master Chief." Admiral Vance said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, lethal whisper that promised absolute destruction. "I am deploying Dev Greco Squadron directly to your city right now, and by tomorrow morning this Cavallo kid will be nothing more than a terrifying cautionary bedtime story we tell young trainees." Arthur killed the secure connection and leaned heavily back against the cold brick basement, while a grim, ruthless, predatory smile spreading slowly across his bloody, bruised face as the unstoppable apocalyptic gears of federal military retribution began to spin. Hundreds of miles away in a neon-lit underground luxury nightclub, Vincent Cavallo was popping expensive champagne bottles and bragging loudly to his gang about how he had just robbed pathetic old weakling, blissfully and fatally unaware that he had just signed his own gruesome death warrant. The deafening thump of heavy bass vibrated through the thick bulletproof glass of the exclusive underground VIP lounge as Vincent Cavallo toasted his own perceived invincibility. The young crime boss was lounging arrogantly on a plush red velvet couch surrounded by overpriced imported liquor and dozens of sycophants who laughed far too hard at every single stupid joke he told. The classic black Mustang Mach 1 was currently parked in his heavily guarded private garage 3 floors below, serving as a brand new trophy of his absolute dominance over the weak civilians of the city. He raised his diamond-encrusted champagne flute to the ceiling, completely ignorant of the apocalyptic hellstorm that was currently hurtling downward from the freezing stratosphere directly above his head. 30,000 feet in the pitch-black night sky, the heavy cargo ramp of a classified military C-17 Globemaster lowered with a deafening mechanical groan into the thin, freezing air. 24 lead operators from the United States Navy SEAL Team 6 Echo Squadron stood in two perfect deadly lines, wearing high-altitude, low-opening oxygen masks and full matte black tactical gear. These were not ordinary soldiers. These were apex predators forged in the most unforgiving combat zones on the entire planet, and they had just been given a blank check directly from the Pentagon to completely erase the cartel that dared to lay hands on their founding father. Commander John Vance, the squadron leader, and a proud former student of Arthur Pendleton, held up a single gloved hand. His piercing eyes were cold and completely devoid of any mercy or hesitation. For the Reaper, Vance whispered into a secure comms earpiece, his gravelly voice cutting through the roar of the engines. Every single operator in the cabin echoed the chilling battle cry in perfect unison, before stepping off the edge of the ramp and plummeting into the freezing black abyss like falling stars of pure wrath. They freefell for 2 terrifying minutes, dropping at terminal velocity before deploying their stealth black parachutes at the very last possible second, preventing any civilian or military radar from ever detecting their approach. They glided silently through the toxic city smog, landing with flawless liquid precision directly on a reinforced roof of Vincent's luxury underground nightclub. The operators shed their parachutes in mere seconds, drawing their highly modified suppressed assault rifles, equipped with advanced thermal optics and armor-piercing ammunition. They moved with the coordinated efficiency of a single lethal organism, each man knowing exactly what his objective was before they even hit the ground. Vance signaled with 2 quick finger taps, releasing the deadly pack of wolves onto the unsuspecting prey below. Down on the street level outside the glowing neon entrance of the club, Vincent's heavily armed exterior guards were smoking cheap cigarettes and complaining about the bitter cold. They were hardened street enforcers who had extorted and murdered their way to the top of the local underworld, but they were absolutely nothing compared to the lethal ghost descending upon them. A tall thug leaned against a dirty brick alleyway wall, exhaling a thick cloud of foul smoke, before he felt a cold iron grip clamp brutally around his mouth and jaw. Before he could even widen his beady eyes, a razor-sharp tactical combat knife severed his vocal cords and spinal column in one single flawless deadly motion. The thug dropped dead to the dirty pavement without making a single sound, his heavy dead weight caught by the faceless seal and lowered gently to avoid any disturbance or noise. In less than 40 seconds, all 12 of Vincent's highly paid perimeter guards were surgically and silently exterminated, their concealed weapons rapidly confiscated, and their lifeless bodies dragged deep into the pitch-black shadows of the narrow alleyway. No alarms were tripped, no local police were called, and no one inside the pulsing, crowded nightclub had any idea that their first line of defenses had just been completely vaporized off the face of the earth. Back up on the chilly roof, Commander Vance kneeled beside the massive industrial air conditioning and ventilation system that fed directly into the club's deep underground dance levels. He pulled a small, highly classified military-grade canister from his matte black tactical vest. This was no ordinary tear gas or cheap pepper spray. It was a highly specialized non-lethal neurotoxin developed by Pentagon scientists, designed to instantly paralyze the vocal cords and severely disorient the target without causing permanent lethal brain damage. Vance firmly twisted the heavy metal cap and dropped the hissing canister directly into the main spinning intake shaft. The odorless, colorless chemical gas was rapidly sucked into the heavy ventilation system, flooding the entire crowded nightclub in a matter of seconds. Down in a massive main dance hall, hundreds of Vincent's low-level street thugs and cheap drug dealers were grinding ignorantly to the deafening electronic music when an invisible chemical hit them like a massive brick wall. Men suddenly dropped their expensive mixed drinks, clutching their burning throats in pure panic as they horrifyingly realized they could not breathe properly, and even more terrifyingly, they could not speak or scream for medical help. The entire dance floor rapidly collapsed into a horrifying silent chaos as grown, heavily armed men stumbled blindly, falling hard over each other in a desperate, helpless crawl toward the heavily locked exits. But the SEALs were not there for the low-level street trash. They were there exclusively for the arrogant monster sitting comfortably in the VIP room. Commander Vance and 6 of his best Tier 1 operators rappelled swiftly down the main metal elevator shaft, their heavy boots clanging ominously on the top of the cabin before they expertly pried open the reinforced doors, leading directly into the private third-floor luxury lounge. Inside the elite VIP room, Vincent Cavallo was completely unaware of the silent, deadly massacre unfolding directly beneath his expensive leather shoes because the VIP ventilation system was running on a completely separate, isolated loop. He was currently berating a young, terrified waitress who had accidentally spilled a single tiny drop of clear vodka on his expensive, shining Italian loafers. "You stupid, worthless animal," Vincent spat, viciously grabbing the crying girl roughly by the back of her hair and forcing her brutally to her knees on the hard floor. "Lick it off right now, or I will personally have my men break every single delicate bone in your ugly little hands." The heavy, muscular goons laughed cruelly around the perimeter of the room, drawing their concealed pistols just to intimidate the helpless, weeping girl. Suddenly, the deafening bass music in the club was instantly cut off, followed by the entire lighting grid shutting down, completely plunging the expensive luxury lounge into absolute pitch-black, blinding darkness. "Hey, what the hell is going on with the backup power?" Vincent yelled, annoyed, releasing the girl's hair and blindly feeling around his waistband for his own silver weapon. "Go down there to the basement and fix the generator right now, you useless, lazy idiots." The heavy goons began to stumble around the pitch-black room, cursing loudly and bumping into expensive leather furniture as they tried desperately to find the exit door in confusion. They never even saw the glowing green tactical lasers cutting surgically through the thick, heavy darkness. 8 suppressed rifle shots rang out in flawless rapid succession, sounding exactly like deadly metallic whispers in the suddenly silent room. Vincent's 4 heaviest personal enforcers hit the carpeted ground simultaneously, each one dropping heavily with a perfect fatal double tap, placed precisely in the dead center of their foreheads before they could even draw a single frightened breath. Vincent froze solid in his tracks, his cowardly heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped frantic bird as the warm metallic coppery smell of fresh arterial blood rapidly filled the tight air of the VIP lounge. The club's backup emergency lights finally flickered on, bathing the entire destroyed room in a harsh, sinister, pulsing red glow, revealing a terrifying, impossible waking nightmare that no criminal syndicate could ever possibly prepare for. Standing in a perfect lethal hunting semicircle around Vincent's cowering, pathetic body were 6 massive faceless tactical operators, their suppressed weapons raised and locked directly onto his beating chest, and their glowing green night vision lenses staring down at him like the merciless, unforgiving eyes of angry, vengeful gods come to collect a debt of blood. Vincent fell hard backward over a heavy glass coffee table, shattering it into a million jagged pieces as he scrambled pathetically and cowardly to get away from the deadly military apparitions that had just obliterated his entire crew in seconds. "Who the hell are you?" he screamed hysterically, his former smug arrogance completely evaporating into pure, unadulterated primal terror as the giant operators advanced slowly, without making a single audible sound, their heavy weapons unwavering, and their tactical intentions entirely lethal and absolutely merciless in every conceivable way, because it just ignorantly awakened the true beasts of the underworld. The acrid smell of fresh gunpowder and vaporized blood hung heavily in the red emergency glow of the shattered VIP lounge as Vincent Cavallo scrambled backward like a frightened insect. His expensive Italian silk suit was completely ruined, soaked in the blood of his dead enforcers. "Please wait, I have money," Vincent screamed, hysterically holding his shaking hands up to guard his sweating face from the imposing, faceless ghosts surrounding him. "I have millions in untraceable offshore accounts. You can have every single penny. Just tell me what you want, and I will do it, I swear on my mother's life." Commander Vance stepped forward from the semicircle of lethal operators, his matte black tactical boots crunching loudly over the shattered glass of the coffee table. He reached down with stunning, blinding speed and grabbed Vincent by the throat, lifting the young crime boss entirely off the floor with one incredibly powerful arm. "You have absolutely nothing we want, Cavallo," Vance whispered, his voice modulated through his tactical helmet to sound like a cold mechanical demon crawling out of the abyss. "You made a terminal mistake tonight when you laid your filthy, greedy hands on a Master Chief of the United States Navy, and now your entire miserable existence belongs exclusively to U.S. Vincent's eyes bulged in uncomprehending horror as his fractured mind desperately tried to connect the dots between a frail old man in the driveway and these terrifying military apex predators. The grandpa, he choked out, spitting saliva onto Vance's black Kevlar glove, his entire body trembling with pure primal fear. Vance tightened his brutal grip, crushing Vincent's windpipe, just enough to make him gag and wheeze pathetically for air. "He is the architect of SEAL Team 6, you ignorant trash," Vance growled dangerously. "And he sent US here directly from the Pentagon to collect the rent." Before Vincent could even process the catastrophic reality of his supreme stupidity, Vance drove a heavy armored knee directly into the crime boss's soft, unprotected stomach. The breath exploded from Vincent's lungs in a pathetic wheeze, and he collapsed to the floor, dry heaving violently. Two gigantic operatives immediately stepped forward, yanking Vincent's arms brutally behind his back and securing them with industrial-strength military zip ties that cut deeply into his flesh. They roughly slammed a thick black canvas hood over his head, plunging him into total disorienting blindness. Meanwhile, 3 floors below in a heavily guarded subterranean parking garage, the rest of the SEAL squadron was executing the secondary objective with flawless, ruthless military efficiency. 8 heavily armed cartel mechanics and guards were patrolling the garage, admiring the stolen 1969 Mustang Mach 1, when the heavy reinforced steel doors of the freight elevator were suddenly blown completely off their hinges. The massive C4 explosion vaporized the first 2 guards, instantly sending their shattered weapons flying across the concrete. The remaining 6 thugs frantically raised their automatic rifles, but they were firing blindly into a thick wall of choking gray smoke. Green tactical lasers pierced through the dust like glowing razors, and suppressed rifle rounds dropped every single cartel member before they could even realize they were under direct lethal attack. The garage went deadly silent, except for the soft ticking of the cooling engines. A tall operative calmly walked up to the classic Mustang, running a gloved hand reverently over the pristine glossy black, but checking for scratches. "Objective secured and the vehicle is entirely undamaged," the operative whispered into his secure comms. "Get the package to the roof. We are rigging this entire disgusting building for controlled demolition." Back in the shattered VIP room, Vincent was being dragged unceremoniously by his collar like a piece of discarded garbage. His expensive shoes dragged helplessly across the carpet as the SEALs hauled him up the concrete emergency stairwell toward the roof. He could hear the distinct, sinister beeping of plastic explosives being planted everywhere by the elite soldiers. "Please do not kill me, please, I swear. I will leave the country and never come back," Vincent sobbed, pathetically, the black hood muffling his cries. "You are not going to die tonight, Cavallo," Vance's cold voice echoed in the stairwell over the beeping. "Death is a rapid mercy you have certainly not earned yet, and the Reaper wants to see you personally." They reached a freezing roof where the massive classified stealth Black Hawk helicopter had just touched down without making a single sound on civilian radar. The door slid open and Vincent was brutally thrown head first onto the cold metal floor, rupturing his nose on the diamond plate steel. He screamed in agony, but a heavy combat boot immediately pressed down hard on the back of his neck, pinning him to the floorboard like a captured rat. As the chopper lifted off the roof and banked sharply into the storm clouds, Vance stood at the open door, looking down at the glittering neon nightclub below. He pulled a small classified encrypted detonator from his vest and pressed the firing trigger with zero hesitation. The entire luxury nightclub detonated in a massive synchronized explosion of orange hellfire and shattered concrete. The charges were placed with surgical precision designed to implode the structure inward, preventing any damage to surrounding civilian buildings, while completely incinerating every single ounce of Vincent's criminal empire and erasing his goons from existence. The crime boss lay bleeding on the floor of the helicopter, feeling the concussive shockwave rattling the airframe, and knowing that his entire life was just turned to radioactive dust. The blind flight lasted exactly 72 torturous minutes. Vincent was trembling uncontrollably, his mind shattered by the sheer unstoppable force that had dismantled his syndicate in mere seconds. When the helicopter finally landed with a heavy rattling thud, Vincent was dragged out into the freezing air. He heard the sound of crickets and the distant barking of a dog, realizing with absolute confusion that he was no longer in the city. He was marched roughly down a creaky set of wooden stairs, sensing the damp, musty air of an underground basement. He was forced into a heavy wooden chair, and his ankles and wrists were brutally bound with thick, coarse rope. The black canvas hood was suddenly ripped from his sweating, beaten face. Vincent blinked rapidly against the harsh glare of a single bare light bulb hanging from the exposed ceiling joists. He looked around the dusty basement, and his heart completely stopped in his chest, terror freezing his veins. Sitting directly across from him on a metal workbench was the exact same old man he had beaten and robbed just a few hours ago. Arthur Pendleton was still wearing his torn, bloody plaid shirt, but he no longer looked like a frail civilian. He looked like the undisputed, merciless god of war. Arthur held a heavy welding blowtorch in his right hand, the bright blue flame hissing loudly in the tight space. Behind Arthur stood Commander Vance and two massive faceless Tier One operators, their suppressed rifles resting across their chests like statues of pure lethal intent. "Welcome to my humble abode, Vincent," Arthur rasped, his gravelly voice echoing ominously off the brick walls, sending shivers down Vincent's spine. "I told you that car was not for sale, but you just had to insist. So now we're going to have a very long, very painful conversation about respect, and you are going to pay me back in full for every single sickening drop of vengeful blood I bled on my driveway." Vincent let out a pathetic, gut-wrenching wail of primal terror as Arthur slowly turned up the dial on the glowing blowtorch, the deadly blue flame, growing longer and hotter in the pitch-black basement, as the true nightmare finally began for the arrogant crime boss. The hissing blue flame of the welding torch cast long, dancing shadows across the damp brick walls of the basement, illuminating the pure, abject terror in Vincent Cavallo's widening eyes. He strained violently against the thick, coarse rope, binding his wrists to the heavy wooden chair, but the knots were tied with exacting lethal military precision. Arthur Pendleton, the legendary Reaper, stood over him, his weathered face a mask of cold, unforgiving wrath. "Please, I did not know who you were. I would never have touched your car. Please, just let me go. I will disappear forever," Vincent babbled, hysterically spitting saliva in his desperate panic. Arthur did not speak. He simply moved the glowing blowtorch inches from Vincent's expensive leather shoe, letting the intense, radiating heat blister the material. "This is not about a car, you ignorant little rat," Arthur finally rasped, his voice echoing like grinding stones. "This is about the sickening arrogance of men, like you, who think they can prey on the weak without consequence. You came to my home, you disrespected my sanctuary, and you put your filthy hands on me." Arthur lowered the flame just enough to scorch the tip of Vincent's shoe, causing the crime boss to shriek in anticipation of the burn. Commander Vance stood silently in the shadows, watching his former mentor work with reverent awe. Suddenly, Vance's classified earpiece chirped with an urgent incoming transmission from the Pentagon Tactical Command Center. Vance tapped his comm link and listened for a brief moment before stepping into the harsh light of the bare bulb. "Master Chief, we have a complication," Vance reported, his tone flat and deadly serious. "It appears this trash does not run the entire syndicate alone. His father, Don Carmine Cavallo, just found out about the nightclub explosion, and he has activated the family's entire underground network. They are mobilizing over 200 heavily armed sicarios, cartel enforcers, and dirty cops on their payroll. They are tearing the city apart looking for him." Vincent let out a pathetic, gurgling laugh, spitting blood onto his own shirt. "My father is going to slaughter every single one of you freaks. He is the king of the East Coast, and he has an army, you pathetic old man," Vincent sneered, his frail ego temporarily bolstered by the false hope of rescue. Arthur slowly turned off the blowtorch, the sudden absence of the hissing flame, leaving a heavy, ominous silence in the basement. He looked at Commander Vance, his piercing eyes narrowing into lethal slits. "An army," Arthur repeated softly, a grim, predatory smile spreading across his scarred face. "How wonderful. I was worried my boys would get bored tonight." Hundreds of miles away in a massive gated compound overlooking the city Don Carmine, Cavallo was in a state of absolute murderous rage. The old Mafia boss was pacing furiously behind his heavy mahogany desk, barking orders into a gold-plated secure telephone. "I want every single man on the street with long rifles," and Kevlar Carmine screamed, spit flying from his wrinkled lips. "Whoever hit my son's club thinks they can declare war on this family, find them, and bring me their severed heads by dawn, or I will personally burn this entire city to ash." The Cavallo estate was a veritable fortress protected by 20-foot-high reinforced stone walls, electrified razor wire, and 50 of the most ruthless, merciless killers in the underworld. They patrolled the grounds with illegal automatic weapons and thermal scanners, completely confident that no rival gang or police force could ever penetrate their defenses. But they were not fighting a gang or the police. They were fighting the unstoppable wrath of the United States Armed Forces. In the blackened sky directly above the estate, 3 high-altitude military drones circled silently, locking their classified targeting lasers onto the key strategic points of the compound. Back in the basement, Arthur walked over to his heavy tactical footlocker and began to remove weaponry that had not seen the light of day in over a decade. He strapped a thick Kevlar combat vest over his bloody shirt, grabbing 2 suppressed high-caliber pistols and sliding them flawlessly into his tactical drop holsters. He then pulled out a massive custom-built automatic shotgun, designed explicitly for close-quarters breaching and maximum devastation. Commander Vance watched in silent approval as the legendary Reaper fully reawakened. "You are not going to wait here for them to find us, are you, Master Chief?" Vance asked, kinking his neck to crack the joints. Arthur racked the heavy action of the shotgun with a deafening metallic clack that made Vincent flinch violently in his chair. "We do not hide from cockroaches, Commander. We crush them in their own nest," Arthur declared, his voice rumbling with pure lethal intent. "Call in the rest of Echo Squadron and tell the Pentagon to establish a 10-mile no-fly zone around the Cavallo estate. I am going to personally hand-deliver this trash back to his father in a body bag." Vincent screamed through his gag as 2 gigantic seals grabbed his chair and dragged him roughly up the stairs. Outside in the quiet driveway, the stolen black Mustang Mach 1 was parked flawlessly in its original spot, not a single scratch on its gleaming paint. But beside it sat 2 massive matte black armored assault vehicles, their engines idling with a low, menacing growl. The Tier 1 operators tossed Vincent brutally into the back of the heavily armored transport, chaining him to the reinforced floor. Arthur climbed into the passenger seat of the lead vehicle, his eyes locked on the distant horizon, where the Mafia compound sat like a blight on the city. "Hit it," Arthur commanded coldly. The heavy assault vehicles tore out of the cul-de-sac, moving with frightening speed toward the upcoming carnage. Meanwhile, at the Cavallo estate, the perimeter guards were scanning the tree line with their night vision optics, completely unaware of the invisible death hovering above them. Suddenly, the radio on the lead guard's chest crackled to life with harsh static. "Boss, we have 2 unidentified heavy vehicles approaching the main gate." At high speed, the guard yelled into his radio, raising his rifle. "Light them up, Don," Carmine barked back from a secure office. The guards opened fire, unleashing a massive hail of automatic bullets that sparked harmlessly off the impenetrable military-grade armor of the incoming assault vehicles. The bullets might as well have been pebbles bouncing off a tank. Arthur did not even blink as the tracer rounds ricocheted off the windshield inches from his face. He reached for a small red switch on the dashboard. "Blow the gate," Arthur rasped. The lead assault vehicle fired a highly concentrated breaching rocket directly from its grill-mounted launcher. The projectile crossed the distance in a microsecond, striking the massive reinforced steel gates of the estate with an apocalyptic shattering explosion. The 20-foot-tall gates were instantly ripped from their concrete anchors and launched backward like shrapnel, crushing 4 Mafia guards instantly. The armored vehicles smashed through the smoking ruins, roaring into the courtyard like beasts of hell. Dozens of Mafia sicarios poured out of the mansion, firing wildly into the darkness. But before Arthur or the SEALs even fired a single shot, the night sky completely erupted in a blinding display of lethal, overwhelming military power. The 3 overhead classified drones unleashed a synchronized Hellfire missile barrage, targeting every single armed vehicle weapon cache and sniper tower on the property with surgical, merciless precision. Blinding orange explosions ripped the massive compound apart in a matter of mere seconds, vaporizing the entire first line of Mafia defense into a mountain of scorched rubble and twisted burning metal. The concussive shockwave shattered every single expensive glass window in the luxury mansion, sending showering debris down upon the screaming Cartel survivors, who were now scrambling in pure, unadulterated panic as a true, unstoppable wrath of the Pentagon finally descended upon the previously untouchable underworld kingpin. The deafening roar of the Hellfire missile strike still rung in the freezing night air as thick black smoke billowed from the shattered remains of the Mafia compound perimeter. Dozens of elite sicarios who just seconds ago thought they were the apex predators of the city were now reduced to groaning, writhing figures trapped beneath tons of burning rubble. The heavy matte black assault vehicles slammed to a violent halt in the center of the scorched courtyard, their massive tires crushing expensive imported Italian marble statues into fine white dust. Arthur Pendleton kicked open the passenger door with one fluid, commanding motion, his heavy tactical boots hitting the ground with the finality of a coffin nail. He raised his massive custom-breeching shotgun, pumping the action, once to load a devastating tungsten slug into the chamber. Commander Vance and the rest of Echo's squadron swarmed out from the vehicles around him, forming a flawless, impenetrable, lethal wedge of matte black armor and glowing green tactical lasers. "Move on the house, no survivors," Arthur ordered, his gravelly voice cutting through the roaring flames like a serrated blade. Two enormous SEALs yanked Vincent Cavallo out of the transport truck by his ruined silk collar, forcing the terrified crime boss to walk on his shattered knees toward the blazing ruins of his father's once untouchable fortress. Vincent was weeping uncontrollably, his mind completely fractured by the apocalyptic scale of the retaliation he had ignorantly triggered over a single classic Mustang. Inside the luxury mansion, total panic had consumed the remaining cartel forces. The concussive shockwaves had shattered every crystal chandelier, turning the grand foyer into a deadly minefield of jagged glass and splintered mahogany. Mafia enforcers stumbled blindly through the thick, choking dust, coughing of blood, as they blindly fired their submachine guns into the smoke, convinced they were being invaded by an entire rival army. They were horribly wrong. They were being hunted by lethal ghosts. The heavy oak front doors of the mansion were blown completely inward with a deafening shotgun blast that sent wooden shrapnel tearing to the closest offenders. Arthur stepped through the smoking threshold like a vengeful angel of death, his weapon roaring with merciless precision. Every single shot from the Reaper dropped a hardened killer dead in their tracks, leaving gigantic gaping holes in their expensive suits and shattering their cheap civilian armor like thin tissue paper. Commander Vance and the SEALs moved in perfect synchronized harmony alongside the Master Chief, clearing the massive living room with short surgical bursts of suppressed automatic fire. There was no shouting, no warnings, and absolutely no chance given to surrender or negotiate. The cartel thugs who tried to drop their weapons and run were shot dead in the back without a second thought, and those who tried to fight were dropped with flawless double taps to the forehead before they could even pull their triggers. This was not a police raid where criminal rights existed and lawyers could be called. This was a Pentagon authorized extermination protocol, and the SEALs were following their founding father with pure ruthless reverence. Upstairs in his reinforced secure office, Don Carmine, Cavallo listened to his entire criminal empire being systematically vaporized on the first floor. The old mob boss was shaking violently, his former arrogance entirely replaced by cold, heart-stopping terror as he realized his enforcers were being slaughtered like helpless livestock. He frantically dialed the private secure number of the corrupt city mayor, the man he had bribed with millions to ensure his immunity from all law enforcement actions. The phone rang once before a cold, unfamiliar mechanical voice answered. "This line has been secured under federal military classification Alpha 7 Carmine." The voice stated deadly and calm. "The mayor has just been relocated to a military black site on charges of high treason, and no one is coming to save you. Hang up the phone and prepare for your termination." Carmine dropped the heavy gold receiver, as if it were scalding iron, his blood freezing solid in his veins, as the reality of his doom finally crushed his delusions. He was completely and utterly alone, cut off from every single corrupt politician, judge, and police chief he had ever bought with drug money. The heavy thud of combat boots echoed ominously on the grand marble staircase, drawing closer and closer to his sanctuary, like the relentless ticking of a doomsday clock tightening around his fat neck. Down in the destroyed foyer, Vincent was forced to kneel in the center of the carnage, surrounded by the bleeding, lifeless bodies of men he had once proudly commanded. He looked up through sweat and tears to see Arthur Pendleton slowly reloading his breeching shotgun, his face spattered with cartel blood, but his breathing perfectly calm and steady. "You see, Vincent," Arthur whispered, dangerously stepping closer to the terrifying young man while kicking a dead cartel body out of his path. "This is exactly what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. I built my entire conceivable life crafting the deadliest weapons on this earth, so I could finally retire in absolute peace, and you stupidly dare to bring your trash war directly to my front door." The heavy steel reinforced doors to Carmen's second-floor office suddenly groaned loudly as massive plastic explosives were slapped onto the reinforced hinges by a faceless SEAL. The resulting blast blew the heavy doors off entirely, sending them crashing with a deafening metallic thud onto Carmen's heavy mahogany desk. Arthur walked into the smoking, devastated room, the barrel of his massive shotgun still glowing red-hot from the intense firefight, flanked closely by 4 massive apex predators. Don Carmine Cavallo raised his wrinkled hands, trembling so hard he could barely stand, grasping a cheap pearl-handled revolver that looked like a pathetic plastic toy against the overwhelming military might currently occupying his sanctuary. "I will give you the entire city," Carmine screamed pathetically, his voice cracking in absolute despair and total cowardice. "Just spare me and my son, and we will disappear to Europe tonight." Arthur did not hesitate for a single second. He swung the heavy wooden butt of his shotgun brutally into Carmine's jaw, shattering the bone with a deafening, sickening crack, and sending the old crime boss crashing hard into his own expensive bookcase in a shower of shattered glass and broken teeth. "You have absolutely nothing that I could ever possibly want," old man Arthur growled, as two SEALs dragged Carmine roughly by the thin gray hair out of the office and hurled him mercilessly down the grand marble staircase. Carmine tumbled violently down the long steps, landing in a broken, bleeding heap directly next to his weeping son in the destroyed foyer. The king of the underworld and his arrogant heir were now kneeling side by side in the ashes of their entire empire, surrounded completely by faceless, lethal ghosts who did not care about their money. Commander Van stepped forward with thick Kevlar restraint bag ready to package the targets, but Arthur held up one gloved hand to stop him cold. "Not yet, Commander," Arthur whispered, his piercing eyes burning with a cold, lethal fire as he stared down at the broken, pathetic father and son duo. "They stole my property, they broke my ribs, and they thought they ruled this entire world. It is time to show them exactly where they stand before we bury them far beneath it forever." Arthur reached deep into his heavy tactical pouch and pulled out a small classified black digital tablet, tapping the glowing green screen exactly once with a bloody finger. The entire mansion began to shake violently as a massive unseen mechanical force engaged high above them, and the deafening roar of multiple heavy-lift Chinook helicopters completely blocked out the moonlight as the Reaper prepared to unleash a terrifying classified hell they never even knew existed. The deafening roar of the massive Chinook helicopters shook the shattered foundation of the once untouchable Cavallo estate as hurricane force-down drafts ripped the remaining roof tiles from the burning mansion. Vincent Cavallo and his father, Don Carmine, cowered pathetically on the blood-soaked foyer floor, covering their ears as the unstoppable military might hover just inches above the scorched courtyard. Arthur Pendleton stood completely unmoved by the apocalyptic winds, his battle-scarred face illuminated by the glowing fires of the destroyed criminal empire. He watched with cold satisfaction as a gigantic twin-rotor chopper slowly lowered a massive classified matte black steel shipping container directly onto the ruined marble driveway, crushing the remains of Carmen's expensive luxury cars with a bone-jarring metallic thud. This was not a normal cargo container. It was a highly specialized mobile black site interrogation chamber designed by the Pentagon explicitly for extracting high-value domestic terrorists and completely breaking the human mind without leaving a single trace. The heavy hydraulic doors of the container hissed open, revealing a pitch-black, lightless void that seemed to suck the very air out of the courtyard. Commander Vance grabbed the wrinkled, bleeding Mafia boss by his ruined, expensive suit, while another massive, faceless Tier One operator yanked Vincent to his feet by his throat. "No, please, where are you taking us? We have rights. I demand," a lawyer, Carmine screamed hysterically, his frail ego desperately clinging to the dead rules of the civilian world that no longer applied to him. Arthur turned around slowly, his piercing predatory eyes locking onto pathetic old Mobster. "Lawyers are for citizens, Carmine, and as of tonight you and your pathetic son have officially been classified as enemy combatants by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs." Arthur rasped, his voice cutting through the roaring engine noise like a lethal blade. "Your constitutional rights burned to ash the very second your stupid boy laid his filthy hands on my classic Mustang. Now get in the box before I decide to just shoot you both in the kneecaps and leave you for the rats." The heavily armed SEALs dragged the weeping father and son duo roughly into the pitch-black container, chaining their wrists and ankles securely to solid steel chairs bolted to the floor. Arthur stepped inside the mobile black site just as the massive hydraulic doors slammed shut, SEALs engaging with a deafening metallic clang that instantly plunged him into absolute sensory deprivation. For 10 agonizing seconds there was nothing but pure suffocating silence and the sickening smell of chemical disinfectant. Then a harsh, blinding white lead light snapped on directly above their heads, searing their unadjusted eyes like a physical blow. Carmine blinked frantically, rapidly, trying to assess his horrific new reality. Arthur was sitting casually on a heavy military weapons crate directly in front of them, holding Carmen's highly classified leather-bound Ledger the Exact book that contained the names, accounts, and bribes of every single corrupt politician, judge, and police officer on the cartel's massive payroll. Carmen's fat heart completely stopped in his chest. That was hidden in a reinforced titanium vault in my panic room. The old boss whispered in pure, paralyzing terror. Arthur chuckled, a deep, grating sound devoid of any humor. "My boys cracked your cheap little toy vault in 4 seconds, flat Carmine," Arthur replied, flipping slowly through the incriminating pages with a bloody glove finger. "You built an entire miserable life, thinking you were a mastermind, but you are just a greedy fat parasite feeding on a sick system, and tonight I am the cure." Arthur pulled a small military-grade incendiary grenade from his tactical vest and set it casually on the metal floor right next to a massive pile of bundle $100 bills of seals had confiscated from the mansion safe. He pulled the pin and tossed the ledger directly onto the pile of dirty cash. The grenade ignited with a blinding white-hot flash, instantly incinerating tens of millions of dollars and Carmen's entire criminal legacy into a pile of useless, smoldering gray ash. Vincent sobbed uncontrollably as the intense heat scorched his sweating face, watching his inheritance vaporize in mere seconds. "My entire life," Carmine whimpered, tears of absolute defeat leaking from his wrinkled eyes, his broken jaw throbbing in agony. "You have no life left to mourn, Carmine," Arthur stated coldly, standing up and grabbing a thick steel lever attached to the walled container. Suddenly, the entire mobile chamber lurched violently upward, throwing Carmine and Vincent hard against their chains. The massive Chinook helicopters had engaged their heavy winches, lifting the steel box directly off the ground and rapidly ascending thousands of feet into the freezing storm clouds. The container swayed sickeningly in the hurricane-force winds, causing Vincent to gag and vomit bile onto his own ruined shoes. The freezing wind ripped through the gaps in the doors like a pack of starving wolves biting into Carmen's exposed flesh and chilling his old bones to the very marrow. "Where are we going?" Vincent screamed, panicking, as the air pressure dropped rapidly, making his ears peopy. "We're going nowhere, you ignorant trash," Arthur rasped, pulling the thick steel lever with one powerful yank. The entire metal floor beneath Vincent Cavallo's chair suddenly groaned and dropped open, revealing a gigantic gaping hole of pitch-black night sky. The wind howled violently into the container as Vincent's steel chair slipped over the edge, now dangling helplessly outside the helicopter, suspended only by a single thick hydraulic cable over a terrifying 5,000-foot drop into the churning Atlantic Ocean. Vincent screamed so loudly his vocal cords tore, thrashing wildly as the freezing wind ripped at his bloody clothes. His vision blurred with tears as he looked down at the merciless black waves crashing endlessly far below him, a perfect watery grave just waiting to swallow his broken body whole. Don Carmine screamed for his son, thrashing against his own heavy restraints as he watched his bloodline dangling by a thread. "Please, God, know he is my only son. Spare him. I will give you anything. Just pull him up," Carmine begged, hysterically, his entire criminal empire completely forgotten in the face of raw primal terror. Arthur stood perfectly balanced on the edge of the precipice, seemingly immune to the violent swaying of suspended interrogation chamber. His battle-hardened frame blocked the only dim light reaching Vincent's terror-stricken eyes, casting the Reaper as a massive, imposing silhouette of absolute doom. Commander Van stepped out of the shadows, holding a secure satellite uplink device that was already recording every single pitiful whimper escaping Carmen's lips, broadcasting the Mafia boss's ultimate humiliation directly to the highest classified clearance levels at the Pentagon. "I have already uploaded every single name in your burn ledger to the military servers," Arthur whispered, dangerously leaning close to Carmen's sweating face. "Over the next hour, I am going to read every corrupt mayor, every dirty police chief, and every cartel supplier on that list aloud. And if you hesitate to confirm even a single name for a fraction of a second, I will sever the hydraulic cable myself and let your stupid boy taste the bottom of the ocean. Do you understand me, you pathetic old ghost?" Carmine nodded, frantically weeping salty tears of total submission, his arrogant spirit completely destroyed as the legendary Reaper pulled a small tactical combat knife from his sheath and rested the razor-sharp blade gently against the thick tension cable holding Vincent Cavallo's pathetic, miserable life by a single frail thread. He looked down at the merciless black waves crashing endlessly far below him, a perfect watery grave just waiting to swallow his broken body whole. Don Carmine screamed for his son, thrashing against his own heavy restraints as he watched his bloodline dangling by a thread. Please, God, know he is my only son, spare him. I will give you anything, just pull him up, Carmine begged, hysterically, his entire criminal empire completely forgotten in the face of raw primal terror. Arthur stood perfectly balanced on the edge of the precipice, seemingly immune to the violent swaying of suspended interrogation chamber. His battle-hardened frame blocked the only dim light reaching Vincent's terror-stricken eyes, casting the Reaper as a massive imposing silhouette of absolute doom. Commander Van stepped out of the shadows, holding a secure satellite uplink device that was already recording every single pitiful whimper escaping Carmen's lips, broadcasting the Mafia boss's ultimate humiliation directly to the highest classified clearance levels at the Pentagon. I have already uploaded every single name in your burn ledger to the military servers, Arthur whispered, dangerously leaning close to Carmen's sweating face. Over the next hour, I am going to read every corrupt mayor, every dirty police chief, and every cartel supplier on that list aloud. And if you hesitate to confirm even a single name for a fraction of a second, I will sever the hydraulic cable myself and let your stupid boy taste the bottom of the ocean. Do you understand me, you pathetic old ghost? Carmine nodded, frantically weeping salty tears of total submission, his arrogant spirit completely destroyed as a legendary Reaper pulled a small tactical combat knife from his sheath and rested the razor-sharp blade gently against the thick tension cable holding Vincent Cavallo's pathetic, miserable life by a single frail thread. Chinook helicopters were initiating a rapid vertical descent. The sound of the rotors shifted from a high-pitched whine to a heavy, deafening thump as they hovered just 50 feet above a massive rusting metal structure thrusting out of the churning black ocean. It was Deepwater Station Nine, a classified abandoned oil rig located 300 miles off the coast in international waters that had been secretly converted by the Pentagon into the most brutal, inescapable military black site on the entire planet. The helicopters lowered the container heavily onto the rain-slicked helipad of the rig, the massive impact rattling Carmen's shattered jawbone. The hydraulic doors of the container hissed open, exposing the freezing ocean spray and the blinding white glare of dozens of heavy industrial halogen searchlights. Standing in a perfect lethal perimeter around the helipad were over 40 heavily armed Tier One operators wearing full matte black tactical gear and holding suppressed weapons, their faceless visages greeting the new inmates with zero emotion. Arthur stepped out of the container into the pouring rain, the freezing drops washing the dried cartel blood from his rugged, indestructible face. Welcome to your new home, Carmine, Arthur boomed loudly over the roaring storm. There are no cell blocks here, no lawyers, no phones, and no visitation hours. You are now officially the classified property of the United States Navy, and we are going to spend the rest of your miserable natural life teaching you the true definition of respect. Two enormous seals entered the container with heavy iron shackles, their green night vision lenses glowing menacingly, as they prepare to drag the terrified Mafia boss and his broken son down into the windowless submarine levels where the real punishment was only just beginning. The heavy, rusted iron doors of Sublevel 7 slammed shut with a deafening metallic boom that reverberated through the cold, damp belly of Deepwater Station 9, like the final tolling of a doomsday bell. Don Carmine Cavallo, once the undisputed, ruthless king of the East Coast underworld, was roughly thrown to the freezing wet steel grating by two massive faceless Tier 1 operators. His expensive tailored Italian suit was now completely shredded and soaked with freezing ocean spray, his wrinkled flesh shivering uncontrollably in the harsh, frigid air pumped directly from the surface of the Atlantic storm. Beside him, his arrogant son Vincent lay curled in pathetic tight field position on the wet floor, rocking back and forth in a state of permanent catatonic terror, whispering incoherent apologies to ghosts only he could see. The arrogance that had once defined the Cavallo bloodline had been surgically and brutally excised in a single night of overwhelming military wrath. Carmine pushed himself up on his bleeding, shattered knees, coughing up salty bile as he stared into the pitch-black shadows of his new eternal prison. The cell was not a traditional prison room. It was a raw, exposed engineering bay directly beneath the ocean's surface. The walls were made of thick, weeping concrete and heavy steel pipes that groaned sickeningly under the crushing pressure of the sea outside. There were no beds, no toilets, and no lights except for a single harsh red emergency bulb caged in thick wire. Please, Carmine begged, his voice a weak, pathetic rasp echoing off the rusted metal. We need medical attention. My jaw is broken, my son, is lose his mind. Please, you cannot treat human beings like this. The two gigantic seals stood in the doorway, their green night vision, lenses glowing mercilessly in the red darkness. One of them stepped forward, his heavy combat boots clanking on the grating, and delivered a swift, brutal kick directly to Carmen's shattered jaw. The old crime boss spun across the floor, spitting out 3 more bloody teeth, as white-hot agony exploded through his skull. You forfeited your humanity the second you put a price on innocent lives, Carmine, the seal whispered, his voice mechanically modulated to sound like cold grinding steel. This is a pressure chamber protocol. Every 6 hours we flood this bay with 3 feet of freezing ocean water. So, if you want to breathe, you have to stand. And when your legs finally give out, you can join the rest of the rats at the bottom of the sea. The heavy iron door slammed shut again, and the thick deadbolt slid into place with a terrifying clack, leaving the father and son duo trapped in a freezing, lightless purgatory. Hundreds of miles away on the mainland, the warm morning sun crept slowly over the quiet, manicured lawns of Arthur Pendleton's suburban neighborhood. The birds were chirping peacefully, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the ancient oak trees, as if the apocalyptic hellstorm of the previous night had never even occurred. Arthur, the legendary Reaper, stood in his driveway, wearing a fresh, clean white t-shirt and faded blue jeans, carefully running a soft microfiber cloth over the glossy black hood of his 1969 Mustang Mach 1. The car was completely flawless, not a single scratch or dent marring its perfect surface, restored to its rightful place exactly as it was before Vincent's fatal mistake. Arthur's weathered, battle-scarred face was calm and serene, his breathing steady as he meticulously polished the chrome bumper. No one in the sleepy cul-de-sac had any idea that the kind old grandfather who fixed their children's bicycles had just personally commanded a Tier One Special Forces unit to completely vaporize the most powerful crime syndicate in the state. A green military Humvee slowly rolled down the quiet street, pulling to a silent stop in front of Arthur's house. Commander John Vance stepped out wearing civilian clothes, a simple leather jacket and jeans, but still walking with the unmistakable rigid predatory posture of a Navy SEAL. He approached the driveway and offered a crisp, sharp salute, which Arthur returned with a slow, deliberate nod. The operation was a total, unmitigated success, Master Chief Vance reported, quietly keeping his voice low to avoid alerting the nosy neighbors. Every single high-level target on the confession ledger has been secured in military custody. The mayor has resigned in disgrace, and Carmine is currently enjoying the freezing tides of Deepwater Station 9. You have officially cleaned the entire board. Arthur folded his polishing cloth and leaned back against the wide hood of classic muscle car, his piercing eyes scanning the peaceful horizon. A clean board only stays clean for so long, Commander Arthur rasped, his deep voice rumbling with centuries of combat wisdom. Nature abhors a vacuum, and when you cut off the head of a snake, you better be prepared to deal with the parasites that come crawling out of the corpse to claim the leftovers. Vance frowned, his tactical mind instantly grasping the gravity of the old warrior's warning. Are you expecting retaliation, Sir Vance? Asked, his hand instinctively drifting toward a concealed weapon at his waist. Carmine was not at the top of the global food chain, Commander Arthur replied, coldly turning to look Vance dead in the eye. He was a distributor for the Russian Bratva and the South American cartels. You think those international ghosts are just going to ignore the fact that their most lucrative East Coast logistics hub was just incinerated overnight? They will send their own cleaners, and they will trace the destruction straight back to this very driveway. As if on cue, the distinct roar of multiple high-performance engines echoed down the suburban streets, shattering the morning peace. 4 heavily tinted matte gray Mercedes G-Wagons rolled aggressively into the cul-de-sac, their suspensions riding low under the weight of heavy military-grade armor plating. They parked in a tight, deadly barricade formation, directly blocking Arthur's house. The heavy, armored doors swung open in perfect unison, and 18 gigantic men spilled out onto the clean concrete. These were not cheap street thugs in leather jackets. These were highly paid international cartel mercenaries, former Spetsnaz operators, and ex-cartel sicarios wearing custom-tailored suits over thick Kevlar vests, carrying suppressed short-barrel automatic rifles in broad daylight. They moved with silent, lethal efficiency, fanning out across Arthur's perfectly manicured lawn like a pack of starving hunting dogs. The lead mercenary, a massive Russian man with terrifying tattoos crawling up his neck, stepped forward with a cold, arrogant smirk, expecting to find a helpless old civilian. Instead, he found the legendary Reaper standing calmly with Commander Vance. Arthur did not flinch, he did not panic, and he certainly did not back away. He simply sighed heavily, dropped his polishing cloth, and pressed a hidden button underneath the bumper of his Mustang. The entire trunk of the classic car popped open, revealing a massive hidden arsenal of classified military weaponry. "You ghosts never learn, Arthur," whispered, dangerously grabbing two heavy submachine guns from the trunk, as Vance drew his weapon with blinding speed. The tranquil morning silence of suburban cul-de-sac was instantly shattered by the deafening roar of suppressed automatic weapons fire as 18 elite international mercenaries unleashed a massive hail of armor-piercing rounds directly at Arthur's driveway. Their expensive bullets tore through the manicured green lawn, shredding the old oak trees and shattering the brick facade of Arthur's humble house. But they were firing at ghosts. The very second the Russian leader smirked, Arthur and Commander Vance had already moved with ungodly predatory speed, diving flawlessly behind the impenetrable bulletproof engine block of the 1969 Mustang Mach 1. The mercenaries assumed they had pinned down a helpless old man and a single bodyguard, so they advanced arrogantly across the grass, expecting an easy execution. They were horribly, fatally wrong. Arthur popped up from behind the classic car, gripping two classified high fire rate submachine guns that spit lethal tungsten rounds at terrifying 1,000 rounds per minute. He did not spray. Wildly like a street thug, he fired with the cold, calculated surgical precision of the Reaper. His first burst caught three Spetsnaz veterans dead center in their Kevlar vests, the specialized armor-piercing ammunition punching through their expensive plates like they were made of wet tissue paper. They dropped lifelessly onto green grass, their blood pooling bright red against the morning dew. Commander Vance flanked smoothly to the right, rolling across the driveway and firing his heavy sidearm with flawless double taps, eliminating two Cartel sicarios who were trying to flank the garage. The Russian leader realized with sickening instant panic that his elite hit squad had just walked blindly into a lethal tactical wood chipper. Spread out and flanked them used the vehicles for cover, the Russian bellowed in his heavy accent, diving behind one of the matte gray G-wagons as the carnage rapidly escalated into a full-blown military war zone right in the middle of a quiet American neighborhood. But Arthur had prepared for this exact scenario for over 20 years. He slapped two fresh extended magazines into his weapons and looked at Vance with a grim, deadly smile. "Activate perimeter protocol, Omega," Arthur shouted over the deafening roar of the firefight. Vance tapped a secure earpiece, sending a classified, encrypted signal directly to the hidden servers buried deep beneath Arthur's house. The invading mercenaries suddenly heard a terrifying mechanical, whirring sound echoing from every single direction. They looked around in pure confusion as four innocent-looking green electrical transformer boxes positioned around the cul-de-sac suddenly split open, revealing highly classified automated military sentry turrets equipped with thermal targeting sensors and rotary barrels. Before the assassins could even raise their weapons to fire at the new threat, the sentry turret spun to life with deadly mechanical whine, unleashing a merciless hail of suppressive fire that crossed the entire street in a flawless lethal grid. The G-wagons were instantly shredded into twisted, sparking metal traps, their heavy armor plating completely obliterated by the sustained heavy-caliber barrage from the automated defenses. 5 more mercenaries were cut down in mere seconds, their bodies thrown violently against the scorched asphalt like broken rag dolls. The remaining 8 assassins were now completely pinned down behind the burning wreckage of their own vehicles, trapped in a deadly kill zone devoid of any escape. "This is impossible," we were told. He was a retired civilian, the Russian leader screamed into his radio, his arrogance entirely replaced by cold, heart-stopping terror as he watched his $1 million kill squad get systematically vaporized in under 60 seconds. Arthur stepped out from behind the Mustang, his weapons raised, walking slowly and calmly toward the burning vehicles, like an unstoppable apex predator. He fired short control bursts, executing 2 more sicarios who tried to blind fire over the hood of a shattered G-wagon. "We are not civilians, you ignorant trash," Arthur rasped, his deep gravelly voice projecting clearly over crackling flames and moaning assassins. "We are the architects of your absolute destruction." The Russian leader, realizing his entire team was dead or dying, made a desperate, cowardly play. He pulled a heavy fragmentation grenade from his tactical vest, yanked the metal pin out with his teeth, and kicked open the back door of his ruined vehicle. He grabbed a terrified hostage he had stowed in the back seat, an innocent young woman bound and gagged, intended to be used as leverage against the cartel's local rivals. He dragged her out roughly, holding her as a pathetic human shield with a live explosive grenade pressed directly against her fragile neck. "Drop your weapons, old man, or I vaporize her right here," the Russian spat, sweat pouring down his tattooed face, his eyes wide with primal panic and sheer desperation. Commander Vance froze in place, his finger tightening on his heavy trigger, but knowing he did not have a perfectly clear shot without risking the innocent hostage's life. The street went deadly silent except for the roaring car fires and the muffled weeping of the terrified young woman. Arthur did not drop his classified weapons, and he certainly did not hesitate. His battle-scarred face hardened into a sculpted mask of pure lethal calculation that brooked absolutely no compromise. "You brought a civilian hostage to a firefight with United States Navy SEALs," Arthur whispered, dangerously tilting his head slightly to gauge the wind. "That is the absolute stupidest mistake you will ever make in your entire pathetic, miserable existence." Without lowering his submachine gun, Arthur rapidly raised his left combat boot and kicked a shattered piece of jagged metal debris on the ground, launching it directly into the Russian's unprotected shins. The brutal impact made the assassin flinch for a single fraction of a millisecond, loosening his iron grip on the hostage just barely enough. It was all the opening the Reaper needed to deliver ultimate judgment. Arthur fired a single flawless surgical round from his hip, striking the Russian directly in the wrist, holding the live grenade, completely shattering the carpal bones into dust. The Russian screamed in piercing agony, dropping the live explosive to the blood-soaked asphalt. In one fluid, lightning-fast motion, Commander Vance sprinted forward, tackling the crying hostage to the ground and shielding her body entirely with his own heavy Kevlar vest, while Arthur calmly kicked the rolling grenade directly underneath the Russian leader's own leaking, burning G-Wagon. The resulting explosion was apocalyptic, sending a massive pillar of blinding orange hellfire into the morning sky and launching the Russian assassin backward into the ruins of his dead crew like a discarded broken toy. Arthur lowered his smoking weapons, a thick dust clearing to reveal 18 elite international killers, completely neutralized on his manicured front lawn with not a single scratch on the old Master Chief. He looked at Commander Vance, who was gently untying the weeping hostage and checking her for injuries. "Call the black site cleaning crew," Commander Arthur stated coldly as he turned around and walked calmly back toward his undamaged Mustang, ignoring the burning carnage entirely. "And tell the Pentagon to fuel the long-range stealth bombers, because we are no longer playing local defense. I am going to burn their entire global network to the ground before the sun sets today." The thick black smoke rising from the shredded mercenary convoy on Arthur Pendleton's front lawn was quickly washed away by the deafening downwash of 3 arriving military cleanup helicopters. Dozens of faceless federal agents in hazmat suits and full tactical Kevlar swarmed the once peaceful suburban cul-de-sac, methodically erasing every single piece of evidence from the apocalyptic firefight. They scrubbed the blood from the asphalt, collected the shattered assassins, and loaded the burning vehicles into heavy transport trucks, leaving the neighborhood looking exactly like a tranquil civilian paradise once again. Arthur did not stay to watch the cleanup. He was already striding up the drop ramp of a classified stealth chopper, his piercing eyes focused entirely on the global map displayed on Commander Vance's digital tablet. The Russian Bratva and the Southern cartels just made a fatal tactical error, Master Chief, Vance reported, his gravelly voice barely audible over the roaring twin turbines. "Our cyber command just intercepted an encrypted distress signal from the dead Russian assassin's radio. It bounced directly to a highly fortified private mountain castle hidden deep in the snow-covered peaks of the Carpathian Mountains. Intelligence confirms that Nikolai Volkov, the ruthless head of the global syndicate, is currently hosting an emergency summit there with the top cartel warlords. They are pooling their entire international resources to launch a massive coordinated strike on American soil in retaliation." Arthur strapped himself into the jump seat and began meticulously loading heavy tungsten slugs into his massive custom breaching shotgun. "They are not going to live long enough to see another sunrise, let alone launch a terrorist strike," Arthur rasped coldly. "Tell the Pentagon to scramble the B-2 Spirit stealth bombers out of Ramstein Air Base. I want that entire mountain range reduced to glowing radioactive slag before we even touch the ground." The heavy chopper accelerated rapidly into morning clouds, rendezvousing with massive C-17 Globemaster over the Atlantic Ocean. Arthur and the elite operators of Echo Squadron boarded a massive transport plane, gearing up in heavy insulated Arctic tactical suits and high-altitude oxygen masks, preparing themselves for the most dangerous halo jump of their entire story careers. Thousands of miles away in the freezing, unforgiving wilderness of the Carpathians, the ancient stone castle stood like an impenetrable monument to human greed and global corruption. The mountain fortress was heavily guarded by over 300 of the most lethal former Spetsnaz commandos and highly trained cartel hitmen that dirty money could possibly buy. They manned heavy anti-aircraft batteries, reinforced machine gun nests, and advanced thermal surveillance towers, completely confident that their secret criminal summit was entirely invisible to the outside world. Deep inside the luxurious reinforced war room, Nikolai Volkov pounded his heavy fist on a massive oak table, shattering a crystal vodka glass into dozens of sharp, jagged pieces. "We cannot let this insult stand," Nikolai bellowed to the gathered cartel warlords, his thick face purple with rage. "This American commander just erased our most profitable logistics hub in a single night. We will mobilize every underground sleeper cell we have in the States, and we will burn their cities to the ground in pure retribution." The cartel bosses murmured in dark agreement, raising their drinks to the impending slaughter. They never even heard the invisible wings of the B-2 stealth bomber slicing silently through the freezing stratosphere 40,000 feet directly above their arrogant heads. The apocalyptic military retaliation began without a single warning siren or radar blip. Two massive 20,000-pound classified bunker-buster munitions detached from the black stealth bomber and plummeted downward at blistering supersonic speed. They struck the outer defensive stone walls of the ancient castle with a bone-shattering concussive force that registered as a severe earthquake on geological sensors hundreds of miles away. The massive orange hellfire balls melted the heavy anti-aircraft batteries into pools of boiling liquid slag and vaporized over 100 elite guards in a fraction of a millisecond, sending thousands of tons of shattered burning stone cascading violently down the steep avalanche-prone mountainside. The once impenetrable historic fortress was instantly reduced to a cratered, smoking slaughterhouse of pure horror. Inside the war room, the concussive shockwave threw Nikolai and the cartel warlords violently to the floor, shattering every single pane of bulletproof glass and plunging the luxury castle into sickening chaos. What in the world was that? Nikolai screamed, spitting thick, choking dust from his dry mouth as the heavy backup generators flickered on, bathing the room in a sinister, pulsing red emergency glow. Before his surviving personal guards could even raise their assault weapons, a true tactical nightmare descended directly from the freezing black sky. Arthur Pendleton and 20 elite SEALs plummeted right to the thick plumes of black burning smoke, deploying their stealth canopies at the very last conceivable second and landing with deadly liquid precision directly inside the scorched courtyard of the castle. The remaining panicked Spetsnaz guards opened fire, wildly, their bright muzzle flashes illuminating the thick dust cloud in short strobe-like bursts. But the SEALs moved like merciless predatory phantoms, avoiding the inaccurate bullets entirely. Green tactical lasers cut through the heavy smoke like surgical blades, and suppressed automatic fire dropped the Russian guards with flawless, deadly military efficiency. Arthur breached the main wooden doors of the keep with a devastating blast from his massive custom shotgun, blowing a gigantic hole straight through the thick reinforced oak and tearing directly through two heavily armored thugs standing in vain on the other side. He entered the grand marble hall, like the actual god of war, his weathered eyes locked dead onto the massive staircase leading up to the reinforced war room. Commander Vance and his Apex operators secured the entire perimeter, dropping any highly paid cartel hitman stupid enough to poke their head out from behind the stone pillars. "They are holed up in the upper sanctuary," Vance yelled over the deafening roar of the blazing, burning rubble all around them. Arthur did not say a single word in response. He just reloaded his heavy weapon with a lethal metallic clack and began walking slowly and deliberately up the destroyed marble staircase, completely ignoring the burning pieces of debris falling heavily from the shattered ceiling. Nikolai heard the relentless heavy footsteps approaching his reinforced doors like the march of doom itself. The powerful Russian warlord was trembling uncontrollably, finally realizing with crushing, paralyzing horror that his entire global private army had just been obliterated in less than 3 minutes by a single squadron of unstoppable ghosts. He grabbed a heavy squad automatic machine gun from a dead guard and aimed it at the door's cold sweat pouring rapidly down his dust-covered tattooed face. The reinforced doors exploded inward in a massive shower of deadly wood splinters and twisted metal as Arthur kicked them open with unstoppable brutal force. Nikolai screamed in primal terror and squeezed a heavy trigger, but his weapon just clicked uselessly, the magazine completely emptied in the previous chaos. Arthur stood in the smoking doorway, a terrifying silhouette of pure, vengeful wrath, holding his glowing shotgun pointed directly at Nikolai's beating chest. "Your global underworld network is officially canceled," Arthur whispered coldly, his voice freezing the very air in the room. But before Arthur could pull the lethal trigger, the stone floor beneath them suddenly groaned loudly, and the entire back wall of the war room slid open with metallic grind, revealing a massive classified nuclear countdown timer wired directly to a gigantic stolen dirty bomb large enough to vaporize half the continent. Nikolai laughed maniacally, spitting blood, as he held a digital dead man switched tightly in his shaking hand. "If I have to die, we all burn in hell together, you pathetic American dog," Nikolai screamed, as the bright red lead numbers started ticking down rapidly from 30 seconds, as Arthur realized he was now standing directly on top of a thermonuclear trap with absolutely no escape helicopter in sight, and only a few fleeting moments left to save millions of innocent lives from total atomic annihilation. The blinding red lead numbers of the massive dirty bomb ticked down mercilessly to 28 seconds, casting a sinister pulsing glow across the shattered war room as Nikolai Volkov laughed with the hysterical mania of a dead man walking. He gripped the black digital dead man switch so tightly his tattooed knuckles turned bone white, knowing that if his heart stopped beating or his fingers relaxed for even a fraction of a millisecond, the thermonuclear payload would instantly vaporize the entire Carpathian mountain range and every living soul within a 500-mile radius. "You cannot shoot me, old man," Nikolai spat, coughing up thick black dust. "You pull that trigger, and we all become radioactive ash falling on Europe." Commander Vance and the elite SEALs of Echo Squadron immediately raised their suppressed weapons, but held their fire, their tactical minds rapidly calculating that no conventional bullet could drop the warlord without triggering the catastrophic blast. But Arthur Pendleton did not panic, and he certainly did not lower his massive custom shotgun. He stared into Nikolai's crazed eyes with the absolute deadly calm of a predator who had seen this exact cowardly play 1,000 times before. "You forget who buried you, Volkov," Arthur whispered, his voice cutting through the panic like a serrated ice blade. "I do not use conventional ammunition." Without a single microsecond of hesitation, Arthur squeezed the heavy trigger of his shotgun. But instead of a devastating tungsten slug, the weapon fired a highly classified experimental Pentagon payload directly at Nikolai's chest. A massive net of superconducting carbon nanotubes erupted from the barrel, wrapping instantly around Nikolai's entire upper body and deploying a 10,000-volt neuromuscular paralyzing shock. The intense electricity instantly overrode Nikolai's central nervous system, causing every single muscle in his tattooed body to lock into a state of rigid, unbreakable tetanus. His hand froze like solid iron around the dead man's switch, his eyes bulging in mute, paralyzed horror as he toppled backward like a rigid stone statue, hitting the shattered marble floor with a heavy thud. His lungs were paralyzed, his vocal cords were frozen, and his grip on the detonator was permanently locked in a vice of pure electrical agony. 20 seconds, Vance yelled, sprinting across the debris-strewn floor with his heavy tactical bolt cutters. The commander dropped to his knees beside the massive nuclear payload, his piercing eyes scanning the complex spaghetti of high-explosive wiring. This was not a standard bomb disarmament. It was a cobbled-together nightmare of Soviet-era junk and cartel modifications. "Cut the blue cable strip with yellow," Arthur ordered, calmly walking over and pressing his heavy combat boot down onto Nikolai's paralyzed chest. Vance did not question the Master Chief for a single second. He slipped the heavy steel jaws of the cutters around the specified wire and snapped it clean in half with one powerful squeeze. The glowing red countdown timer froze dead at exactly 3 seconds of deafening silence in the shattered war room, broken only by the heavy breathing of elite operators. The apocalyptic threat was completely neutralized. Arthur looked down at the paralyzed Russian warlord, whose eyes were darting frantically in pure paralyzing fear, trapped completely inside his own rigid muscles. You are going to spend the rest of your miserable natural life in a suspended plexiglass box at Deepwater Station 9, sitting right next to Carmine Cavallo, Arthur stated, coldly reaching down and prying the detonator from Nikolai's frozen iron grip. And every single day you will remember that you lost your entire global empire because some stupid street punk decided to steal a classic American muscle car. Two enormous seals grabbed Nikolai's rigid statue-like body and dragged him roughly out of the destroyed keep toward the waiting extraction choppers. Arthur walked out onto the shattered balcony of the castle, overlooking the burning, cratered ruins of the once impenetrable mountain fortress. The sun was just beginning to rise over the freezing Carpathian peaks, bathing the devastation in a cold golden light. Commander Vance stepped up beside him, slinging his suppressed rifle over his broad shoulder. The global syndicate is completely dismantled, Master Chief Vance said, quietly, his voice filled with absolute reverence for the old warrior. The world is officially clean again. Arthur pulled a clean microfiber cloth from his tactical pocket and carefully wiped a small speck of soot from his matte black weapon. It is clean for today, Commander Arthur replied, his predatory eyes scanning the endless horizon. But the weak will always need shepherds and the wolves will always try to bite, so we will always be ready to hunt. The legendary Reaper turned and walked back toward the shadows, leaving the burning ashes of corruption far behind him, returning to the quiet suburbs where his black Mustang was waiting, proving once and for all that the greatest
Honor is
mistake a
never
monster
lost, only
can
hidden.
ever make is
You've
waking
seen
up
the
the true god of
retribution.
war.
Join the elite forces and expose the truth. Subscribe to Honor Hidden now.